Auntie, please help me. Something is coming out of my body. Please, somebody help me. Look at me. What is happening to me? I don't know what happened to me. Please, somebody help me. Please. These things are coming out of me. Help me.
Years earlier, Esther was nothing like the woman you have just seen. She was intelligent, hardworking, and calm. She respected her parents, took her studies seriously, and dreamed of building a good future for herself. When she gained admission into university, her parents were extremely happy. Before she left home, they reminded her to stay focused on her studies, be content with what they could provide, and, most importantly, be careful about the friends she made. Esther promised to listen. At the time, she genuinely meant it. She had no idea that university would introduce her to people who would completely change her life. At university, Esther initially remained focused. She attended lectures, studied, and kept to herself. Then she met Jessica and Sarah. The two girls lived very differently from her. They always had money. They dressed beautifully, went to expensive places, and never seemed to worry about where their next meal or transport fare would come from. Esther became curious about their lifestyle. That curiosity eventually became friendship. And before long, the girls introduced Esther to prostitution. They were open about what they did and how much money they made from it. Esther resisted at first. But watching her friends enjoy a lifestyle she could only dream about slowly changed her mind. Eventually, she convinced herself that she would only do it temporarily. Just long enough to make some money. But temporary became normal. And normal soon became her entire lifestyle. Money changed Esther quickly. Her clothes became more expensive. Then came the new hairstyles, piercings, and tattoos. Every time she returned home, her mother noticed another change. Her parents knew their daughter was moving in a direction they didn't like, but Esther no longer wanted to hear their concerns. She believed she was simply enjoying her youth. By the time she finished university, the calm and focused girl who had left home years earlier had changed considerably. Then she met David. And that was when her life took an even darker turn. David was extremely wealthy. He owned several businesses, lived in a massive mansion, and had luxury cars, drivers, security, and workers. But what attracted Esther most was how easily he spent his money on her. He bought her whatever she wanted. He gave her money whenever she needed it. He took her to expensive places and eventually brought her into his mansion. Esther believed she had finally found the kind of life she had always wanted. She didn't know that David's wealth was hiding a terrible secret. David was a ritualist. The women he brought into his life were not simply girlfriends. He would spoil them, gain their trust, and eventually use them in his dark rituals. When he was finished with them, he would send them away. His workers had witnessed it many times. They knew exactly what happened to the women who entered David's life. But Esther knew nothing. She was too comfortable with the money, the mansion, and the lifestyle to ask the questions she should have been asking. One day, Esther visited her parents. They asked about David. They wanted to know what exactly he did, what businesses he owned, and where his wealth came from. But Esther couldn't give them a proper answer. She only knew that he was a businessman. Her parents became concerned. They couldn't understand how their daughter could live with a man whose source of wealth she didn't even know. But Esther brushed off their concerns. She trusted David completely. And once again, she ignored the warning. A few weeks later, Esther woke up in the middle of the night and realized David wasn't beside her. She got up to look for him. That's when she saw him standing in another part of the mansion wearing a red wrapper, looking as though he had just finished some kind of ritual. For the first time, Esther felt that something wasn't right. But David calmly convinced her that it was nothing serious. He reassured her, followed her back to bed and stayed with her until she relaxed. Esther eventually went back to sleep. She didn't know that she had just seen the first real sign of the secret David had been hiding from her. Days later, Esther suddenly became extremely sleepy. Her body felt weak, and she could barely keep her eyes open. Eventually, she lost consciousness. David took her into the hidden room where he performed his rituals. He prepared everything. The red wrapper came out again. And while Esther remained unconscious, David carried out the ritual. By the time he finished, Esther had no idea what had happened to her. She only knew something was terribly wrong when she eventually woke up. Esther could barely move. Her entire body felt weak. Then she looked down. She froze. Strange worm-like creatures were coming from her body. She tried to cover herself. She tried to move away. But she was too weak. Fear completely took over. And when David finally entered the room, the man who had once treated her like a queen showed no concern. He simply ordered his workers to carry her away. The workers weren't surprised. They had seen this before. They carried Esther out, placed her inside a car and took her back to the area where she had once lived. When they arrived, the driver pulled her out and dropped her on the ground. Then he drove away. Just like that, everything Esther had spent years chasing disappeared. The mansion. The money. The expensive lifestyle. David. Everything. She was left alone on the same streets she had once dreamed of escaping. Sometimes, the warning we ignore today becomes the regret we carry tomorrow. And Esther learned that lesson when it was already too late.